Would you like to start with introduction and say a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, go on.
I'm Jamilah. I'm an account director at Carpe Diem. I joined the business last year. Previous to that, I've worked in fashion and pharma. And yeah, this is my first year in tech. Still learning the ropes, and it's a very male-dominated industry still. So learning the ropes and basically just trying to say no to men that don't really get that women know how to do stuff.
Hi, I'm Anne-Marie. I'm the operations director at Carpe Diem. So I sort of run the day-to-day business and also sort of liaise with clients and new business, a bit of everything really. And I've worked in tech for the last 10 years in various guises. So yeah, but that doesn't mean I'm techie.
So this week, Warrington Youth Zone is celebrating women all week in honour of International Women's Day, which was on the 8th. What does International Women's Day mean to you?
Do you want to go first, Jamilah? We'll just do it that way.
Yeah. So for me, International Women's Day is an opportunity to celebrate the achievements of incredible women, regardless of their background. Like, it doesn't have to just be professional. It can be things that they've done in their personal lives. So yeah, that's what it means to me.
For me, it's something that shouldn't be needed, but is. That's the most frustrating thing, I think. It's great. I think it's, I think everyone should be celebrated, but it's annoying that it's needed in the first place. And the thing I get bored of seeing is just the typical, when's International Men's Day? Which also is a thing. But obviously there's a bit more bump around the Women's Day because there is that sort of requirement for it still to sort of push the agenda slightly.
What is the most important message you want to send out to young women thinking about starting their careers?
For me, it should be that they should just dream big, and if their dreams don't exist, then they should create it. Maybe they have a vision to do something that isn't a thing yet, or it's not out there, and they think, oh, there's this really cool thing that I could do, or that should be in the market. So it's just basically saying, yeah, dream big, and if what you want isn't out there, create it.
I think for me, it's to focus on the passions. I think so much with school is all about picking a job or, a specific job, when actually not at an age where you have no idea actually what your passions are and what you sort of actually enjoy doing. So I'd say focus on actually what you enjoy doing and then find the job that suits that and the career that suits that, rather than trying to fit yourself into a box to be something you're not. Nobody told me when I was a kid that, I used to organise, like my library was alphabetized, like my books. I used to record the top 40 on a Sunday and then type out all the song words. I was always into organisation, put it that way. But no one ever tells you there's jobs around that actually suit what you're just naturally good at as well. And it doesn't always have to mean going to university. I went to university for a year and decided it wasn't for me, and then went straight into the workforce, and I've still managed to sort of find my way up with it. So it's just to keep going, really. And like Jamilah said, just having that belief in yourself that you can do anything.
Yeah, I went to university, studied photography, and now that's not what I do in the slightest.
Yeah, so I did psychology.
How do you think we can encourage more women to pursue senior leadership roles?
I think it's about younger women and women that are sort of entering the workforce being able to see more women in the boardroom and in leadership roles, because traditionally, especially like around school and like the education system, a lot of the like leadership roles you see typically are held by men. So a lot of younger women that are sort of entering their careers don't really know. Like, I know for me, I never really saw any women in the workforce at a senior level. So it's just making sure that there's that awareness about women being in leadership roles, and also ensuring that young women are encouraged to go for those leadership roles as well. Yeah, that's probably what I would do.
Yeah, and I think Jamilah's right there. It starts from grassroots level. I think it is starting to change. It's definitely now I see a lot more women sort of pushing that, but it starts from when you're a child. Boys are always sort of already have that self-confidence in themselves because they're hopefully told to like look out for themselves almost and push, whereas women are always told to be nice and look after other people, so they typically tend to forget about themselves. And I certainly struggled with it in the past, where I find it very difficult to talk about my own achievements, and men don't seem to have that struggle. I'm not saying it's everybody, obviously, but in typically women will just sort of share the praise, whereas men are much more likely to go, I did this, I did that. And I see a lot of CVs where, you know, women, it's much more we as a team did this. And I think the focus of actually being okay with being proud of their achievements and actually acknowledging their part in it will certainly help them. And I think a lot more training for women on terms of negotiation. I think a lot of the pay gap as well, which some people still doesn't exist. It definitely does. But a lot of that is also down to negotiation. Something I did early in my career was made sure that I was always, if I thought I was doing something, I encourage everyone to do it. Always have a look at the roles that are in the area for the same thing you're doing, look at the salaries, and then go and ask that of the company you're working for, with reasons why obviously you think you deserve that. And if they're not going to do it, not going to deliver that for you, or not give you a reason of why they can't, then leave. Make sure those companies start to fall by the wayside if they're not going to recognise the female talent and have that diversity of thought. And especially for me, I've worked in industries where there's no female leadership, or I've been the first female director, but it's still sort of been sidelined. And again, it's either being the change you want to see and making sure that you can implement that change for the people coming behind you. But if you're not getting it there as well, it's leave those places, because they'll start to, the other companies that acknowledge that will thrive. And those sorts of dinosaur companies that still want to have the boys club will start to disappear.
That's a great answer. I went to school in the 90s and I don't remember any female leaders. Certainly no one I could look up to at the time.
Yeah.
What would you change about the assumptions made by men of women? Do you still think there are assumptions being made?
I do. I think a lot of men assume that women are sort of guided by emotion or led by emotion, and that's a negative thing. But actually, I think that's what makes women special, because it means that often we're not just going, right, you know, this is just what we want to do. You're able to read the room a bit better, you're able to relate to people on a better level, and, you know, people are able to relate to you a bit more. So an assumption that I found especially is that a lot of men sort of go, we don't need to have emotion in the workplace, but actually it can really go a long way.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't even say it's assumptions made by men of women. I'd say it's assumptions made by anyone of women, because typically, because of the world we live in, women actually have internalized misogyny against other women, which I've also encountered. You know, it's not just men. I got told very early in my career that I would never succeed if I carried on wearing dresses and heels. I haven't stopped doing that. It doesn't seem to have stopped me, weirdly enough. I've had female leaders who've been absolutely terrible and haven't, you know, championed other women or even anyone really. And I've had men who've been really big champions of me in my career in the past. I think some of the assumptions there, it's, you know, how we dress affects our ability to do things, or how we look. And same with, I think, like Jamilah said, the emotional side. The amount of times I've been told in the past, if I've been sort of assertive or calling someone out on something, is that I'm being aggressive or emotional. I've been told to smile or be nicer, which is just something I've never heard a man be told. I've never seen a guy who's, you know, gone, and I've seen men go mental in an office. They've never been told to be nicer. And I think that's still, we still associate certain emotions with women, which I think needs to go. You know, it's every individual is different, and that comes from sort of their background and how they sort of see what a leadership role should be. So it's making sure that we also don't say that soft skills I hate that phrase. It's not a soft skill to be emotionally intelligent and to be able to understand people. It's actually one of the most difficult skills there is, and there are men and women who are very good at it, men and women who are very bad at it. It's just typically, again, more associated with the female side, and I'm glad that's starting to be recognised more as actually a key attribute that a leader should have.
And I think as well, for young girls who are going for their first interviews, maybe they should know what questions are appropriate in an interview. I still remember being asked in my first interview if I plan on having children. I was 16 at the time. I had no idea, and I certainly couldn't answer it then. But they are questions you get asked still.
I had that 2.5 years ago when I was a director role by 2 men, and they tried to say it slightly differently without directly asking, but it was so obvious. They literally said, so tell us about you. You know, what are your aspirations? You know, have you got a boyfriend? Have you got a husband? Do you wanting to literally said you wanted to have kids? And I was like, don't know why that matters. Not sure. Don't know what you're asking there. And I did email them afterwards and said how inappropriate I found it. They never responded. And shockingly, they've hired a male operator, and I'm so surprised. But it's, again, if you get to a certain age, that is the assumption you're gonna, and it shouldn't matter if you are or aren't gonna have kids, because we still need, you know, people coming through, and men still also have to be part of that, of having the children. It's just, again, it's put much more onto the bias of women, and women lose a lot of money from taking time out of their careers. I think there's obviously stats around it. Couldn't quote it off the top of my head, but I know there's a massive sort of discrepancy in what men and women lose when they take time off to have children. It's not like it's just a simple, they're trying to do it to, you know, take a break. It's, you know, one of the most hardest jobs ever. And it should, again, companies should support that, because it's a natural way of life. Women, unfortunately, we're the ones who have to have the children. So that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody.
What challenges or privileges do women stereotypically face based on their gender?
So to me, again, it leads perfectly into this about having children. Typically, women are sort of, you know, there are questions around whether you want to have children or whether you want to start a family, and if there's going to be an association in terms of how much time you need to take out for that. And as Anne-Marie rightly just said, it shouldn't be relevant. Like, people shouldn't be asking whether you're planning to start a family or not, because, again, men have a part in that. And you know, women are massively disadvantaged by taking time out to have children, and it shouldn't be that way, because it is a natural part of life. And is obviously needed in order for the human race to continue to evolve.
Yeah, and I think for me, there's also and again, it's not right across the board, but typically women have, you know, if a company isn't flexible with how it's sort of set up in how women can work, or how the employees can work, that can really negatively affect on women more so than men. Women typically tend to take on more of the household duties. Again, not everyone, but standard. You know, typically if there are children, they will take on most of the childcare, because women just always have that list in their head of the things they need to do, and what some can do in 8 hours, you'll find probably a working mum will probably do in 4. You know, then it doesn't matter how many hours they're working, they're still going to get the job done. And then they go home, they cook the dinner, they get the kids to bed, they do all of those things, as well as, you know, having successful careers. And they're the women I'm always really impressed by. I haven't got children myself, but I still, you know, my previous relationship took on all of the household duties. You know, I've got 2 dogs. It was doing all that, as well as trying to have, you know, the career as well. And you'd have very little downtime. So I think companies having that more flexible way of working, you know, it doesn't have to be the rigid 9 to 5. I think one thing COVID's taught us all is that doesn't need to be a thing. It doesn't affect the outputs you get, and actually you get a lot more by working to suit people's individual lifestyles, which again I think would much more positively be an influence for women.
Yeah, in a previous job, and this was only a year ago, I had a deadline coming up. I was assertive with my male colleagues about getting some stuff together, and I got asked if I was on my period.
Yeah. And you're like, yes, but that's nothing to do with it. It's things like that, but also I think looks based. There is certain privilege with that as well, you know, and there's been studies I think done on that as well, in terms of perceived attractiveness of women tend to do better as well, which is also ridiculous. You know, men don't have to wear, not all men, but you know, don't have to wear makeup or be put together in a certain way that actually women are perceived to do, and you know, being judged on weight as well. You know, overweight women can be seen as like lazy. It doesn't reflect the same way for men. There's loads of different things, but again, I think you can get bogged down in it, but actually you kind of just got to pretend it doesn't exist, and then just keep pushing past it and just prove it through your actual work.
Absolutely. What female-related myths or taboos need to be broken?
That women are just aggressive because they're on the periods at work. Like, maybe they're just being assertive. You know, maybe they're just being assertive, or maybe someone's saying something absolutely ridiculous and they need to be called out on it. So that's a massive one. And again, I probably alluded to this earlier. You know, women aren't all just emotional and doing their jobs or their careers like being led by emotion. Like, that is completely a taboo or a myth. And not all women are gonna sort of like screw a company over by like taking time off to have a child or for anything like that. Like, that's not a thing. Like, you know, again, like we said before, it's just a part of life.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's actually that the fact that we're talking about these sorts of issues doesn't mean that we hate men. It doesn't mean that we think everyone's the same. It's just raising issues that we have faced from a personal lived experience, that should be discussed, and it can be debated. There's plenty of people out there who seem to think the gender pay gap does not exist. If it's not your lived experience, you can't tell someone else it doesn't exist. And that reflects across not just women to men, it's in anything in terms of diversity within hiring cultures and practices and the hiring process. People tend to hire people similar to them. So making sure that they put things in place that means that they are getting that cross section of society in a company is only going to benefit them. And, for me, with being a woman in tech, it's that I won't be able to keep up, or that I don't know what I'm sort of talking about, and that's really frustrating because I've found I've definitely had to work almost like twice as hard as some male colleagues to just even be seen on the same level. But again, I don't really care, because as long as it gets me to where I want to be, I don't really care how I've got to get there. I just want to make it easier for the people coming behind me, and that's why I was wanting to get into a leadership role, was because then I can actually make the changes and be part of that process and sort of what I would have liked to have seen coming up. I think, yeah, as Jamilah said, the typical, I think actually that all women are nice and friendly. We're not that black and white. It's, men and women, it's all about personalities. And, some men are very good with people skills, and some women are very good, but some women are terrible and need to learn that, because either they think they have to act a certain way to get ahead, and they shouldn't. Everyone should be their authentic selves, and then just be open to learning new ways of doing things. You don't get into leadership and suddenly know how to do everything. And I think it's being a bit more open about that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing, is that women can also be quite perfectionist with things, not wanting to say they're struggling because they don't want to admit or be seen as not being what they should be.
Touching back on we have to work harder. I've had plenty of roles where I felt I've had to do more, but that's meant longer hours, and then the awkward conversations that obviously I can't cope with my workload. No, it's just that I'm doing more to prove that I can cope with the original workload.
Yeah, and it comes back to that confidence again of actually speaking up and saying that, and documenting it, and really sort of pushing that, and not just taking on again that extra workload as if like that's what you should do, when actually might be people who aren't, maybe not through any deliberate reason, but aren't taking on their share of the work. It's not always seen, because again, women don't tend to promote themselves and say, I've been doing all this, by the way, I've been doing that, I've owned that, again, and that it's that sort of thing. It's again pushing for those. There's such multifaceted ways of it all sort of connecting, and that's really key to it.
But I think, just to sort of add on from Anne-Marie's point, there is, even like in communicating that, I feel like women, especially when they're communicating with men that have certain attitudes, have to communicate in a way that sort of says, like justifies that, like what they're trying to say and what their cause is. And it's like, you have to document all this stuff and then turn up with like 6 months worth of like evidence that you've been doing all this stuff for them to take it seriously. Whereas I feel that a lot of the time, especially that I've seen in my career, a man could say something that I wanted to say and it would just be accepted as fact, and they wouldn't have to justify it. They wouldn't have to say, actually, here's 6 months worth of evidence of everything that's been put on me. And it's just that sort of attitude and that mentality really needs to shift.
Yeah, I agree with that. This is my favourite question. If you could have dinner with 3 inspirational women, dead or alive, who would you pick and why?
This is really difficult, because I want to have dinner with like every single amazing woman ever. But I would pick Cheryl Strayed, who is an author that also has like a column, that has had like some really horrific life experiences, but she has shown massive sort of perseverance and grit, and has been able to develop a way of communicating to make sure that her needs are met. Rosa Parks, because she is just amazing and was just able to sort of be outspoken in a time where like people really weren't as outspoken and were probably quite afraid to go against societal norms, on top of being a woman, and a black woman at that. So like, she was just unreal. I'd love to have dinner with her. And Zara Sultana, who is an MP. She comes from a working class background. She's been pretty vocal in speaking up, especially like throughout the pandemic and like previously, and I just think she's amazing.
I really struggle with this question, because there's so, like Jamilah said, there's so many, and I don't even think I'd, like, even if I did get them in a room, I'd probably not know what the questions to ask them. I just be like, tell me everything. But yeah, there's certainly women that I've seen that, even in actually my immediate circle, like that I sort of follow on LinkedIn, that I'm really inspired by. I don't think it even has to be like really famous women. There's people who are just doing the do every single day. For them, that sort of really inspires me. So I honestly couldn't say, because I think actually I take bits and pieces from all the women that I see across sort of doing amazing things. And that could be, you know, raising a family and starting a business, or it could just be, you know, going to work every day and sort of climbing that ladder and pivoting and all those sorts of things. I tend to read quite a few different books, but one that I really love is The Authority Gap, which is written by Marianne, I want to say Steichart. And it's all about sort of why women are taken less seriously, and things like that. And I love reading those books. And then sort of when I'm speaking to other women, I'll bring those things up to make sure I'm sort of trying to spread the word with it. And I've always found that when you're having these conversations with other women in the industry, that the stories are always quite inspiring of how they've managed to get to where they are. So yeah, so sorry, I sort of take inspiration from anyone and everyone around me. And that includes men as well, who are allies, where they'll say, you know, actually I did this, and that's a big thing as well for me.
Absolutely. I mean, just speaking to women in the office, I'm sure everyone in the private time, in the hobbies, what they do at work, we only speak about such a small fraction about women's lives. And heaven forbid we talk about anything personal at work. And to be seen to be speaking about personal stuff or gossiping.
Yeah, well, that's it. Even the fact that it's termed gossip, when actually it's just discussing your personal life. And I think that's been, the great thing about LinkedIn. I think certainly over the last few years, that it has become much less corporate. People are, you know, it's all about personal branding, and it's all about the personality and the authentic self, which is massive, you know, because I'm much more interested in working with somebody that I can relate to and that I know, and that I feel like, you know, I respect their values, than it's just a faceless corporation sort of telling me what their values are.
That's true. What advice would you give your 13-year-old self?
I would tell my 13-year-old self to challenge everything. Like, don't just accept that things are the way they are because that's just the way it is. You know, things can be different. Why are things done that way? Is there a better way to do it? You know, are my needs being met? I would insist on following my own path and not sort of being pushed in directions that I didn't really want to go in, through not wanting to speak up or to not want to seem aggressive, as we've mentioned earlier. You know, just being assertive and understanding the difference between being assertive and being aggressive, because what one person might see as being aggressive, someone else might see as being assertive. So being able to sort of be who I need to be, and also back that up and say, actually, I wasn't being aggressive, I was actually being assertive, and here are the reasons why. And probably finally, just to say no to the things that I don't want to do. And, you know, just be firm in that and being able to say no, because I think that a lot of women, especially like from quite a young age, a lot of the time we're brought up with the mentality that we have to say yes to everything, and we have to be people pleasers. And it's almost a relearning and an unlearning and a relearning as an adult, where you actually learn like the power in saying no, and like being able to say that and be firm in that.
Yeah, I mean, alongside telling myself not to buy Body Shop foundation, which was a terrible idea, it'd be, actually, I mean, I don't think I'd change anything about my sort of history to where I am now, because everything that's happened and the adversity is actually what's given me the fire to keep pushing. Actually, every no made me want to succeed more. And every sort of challenge, or every time someone told me I couldn't do something, was exactly the reason I was then more determined to go and do it. And I think if you've got it too easy, almost, you don't have that sort of, you know, not that you wouldn't, but you know, it's much more when you've been told you can't do something or you shouldn't do something. So actually, I think that's a really positive thing. I'd just say keep going. Do you know what I mean? Like, don't worry about it. It's all going to work out in the end. And like Jamilah said, yeah, saying, you know, well, I think for me, the biggest thing, not saying, stop apologizing. I still do. I apologize all the time, you know, and I've actually downloaded a thing on my Chrome that's called Just Not Sorry. And it underlines when I'm using language that's apologetic. Because I'll say things like, "Oh, sorry, you know, I hope this is all right with you," or, you know, let me know, rather than just going, "Here is this, I need this from you. You know, I'm almost apologising for asking for things that I'm meant to be asking for. So yeah, stop apologising would be the biggest one.
I think I'd tell myself that little things like stop trying to fit in, those things that make you different and make you an outcast in school are actually your biggest strength when you leave.
Definitely. And that's it. It's being individual. Like, don't be afraid to be you. If you like a certain thing, that's okay. Like, you don't have to always fit the mold. And I think the other thing as well is sort of making sure that we're not telling young people that they need to be rigid in their ideas and what their trajectory is as a career. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to fail. Like, the biggest lessons you'll learn about yourself are when you fail, and actually it can send you off into the direction you're meant to be in. So I think that's the other thing, again, teaching women it's okay to fail.
And
Like,
it's
okay, it's not actually doesn't mean, it's not that negative connotation. It's actually a learning, and it's gonna, you know, you're gonna be better coming back from that.
And just on the back of that, it's okay to change your mind. Like, you know, you might want to start something, but everything always leads you to your next place. Like, you do something or you go into one thing and you think, don't really know if I want to do this, but then it leads you to your next place, and like, you know, who do you meet along the way and that kind of thing. So it's always important to just, you know, just go with it sometimes, but go with it in the direction that you want to be going.
Yeah, I realised that everyone is winging it.
Yeah.
Like, literally every single person in business is winging it. Like, they're all human. They all go home and they're like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'll just keep carrying on. Eventually, you do figure it out. But actually, unless you're always challenging yourself, you'll never grow. So you need to be doing things that you're actually uncomfortable with, that you don't quite know how to do, and being able to reach out to your network to go, right, who's done this before? Who can help me? And not being afraid to ask it, or thinking that it's a sign of weakness to ask for help and support. You know, director in a company and sort of running the day-to-day business, there's plenty of things I don't know, you know, and I hopefully Jamilah can maybe I don't pretend to know everything either, but yeah, it's okay not to know everything, but everyone is the same. You are not the only one who like is just going, I don't know how I have ended up here.
I think that every day.
I think it's a good thing, it keeps you pushing.
It does. Finally, what would you tell girls and young women who are interested in following their unconventional dreams?
Don't give up. Don't take no for an answer until you've got what you want and you're where you want to be and you're satisfied and you're happy. Don't give up. Just don't take no for an answer, regardless of what everyone else says to you. Because one of the things that I've learned over time is that people tell you not to do things because they wouldn't do it themselves, but not necessarily because it can't be done. So they are then projecting their limitations onto you. And just because they can't do it doesn't mean you can't, because we're all unique and we're all different and we have a completely different outlook. And, you know, I might see, you know, a little glimmer in something that looks really like glum to someone else. So it's just sort of having that sort of perseverance and that grit to just feel like, well, thanks for that, but no thanks, I'm going to do what I want to do. And probably the other thing I'd say is to not underestimate the value of building relationships, because again, like Anne-Marie sort of mentioned earlier, you know, people refer to it as like soft skills, but actually none of us get to the top on our own. Like, we all have to just sort of, we pass other people on the way, and none of us are successful or, you know, have amazing careers or like businesses, whatever it is, without other people being involved. So it's really important to build relationships, because you actually never know where that's going to lead you to.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think like Jamilah said, it's, you know, it's do it. Ignore anyone who's telling you not to. Like, and that includes like parents as well. Sometimes they can project their own idea of what they think success looks like. And we're in a very digital world now, and it's very different sort of workforce to 20, 30 years ago, or even 10 years ago. There's plenty of opportunities out there. And again, it doesn't work out, try something else. Keep trying new things. And there's plenty of stories of people who succeeded much later on in life. You don't have to have it all figured out by the time you're 25 and follow that same sort of route. And that includes marriage and kids and all that sort of thing. You know, you also don't have to try and pretend to have it all. It is difficult and it's hard to achieve a work-life balance. But one of the biggest things I think I would say is, and this is just purely speaking from my own experience, based on how typically at the moment, and I do see things changing, I would say to women, if you are in the workforce and you're not getting where you want to be, or you're not getting that promotion, ask for a job title change. Don't ask for a salary increase, ask for a job title change, and then go and leave. Because the biggest thing, and I've done it before, and I don't know why they didn't even realise what I was doing, was because even though I was doing the role, they wouldn't give me the pay rise for the work that I was doing. So I just asked for a job title change, because then it was much easier for me to get the interviews for places for the role they actually wanted. Because what I found in my personal experience is that men are hired for what they can do or will be able to do, whereas women are hired for what they've already done. So make sure you've got the job title, and then you'll go and get the job at a place that'll actually sort of support you. So that's my other bit of tidbit of advice.
And thank you very much, ladies. Thank you for taking the time out to speak to us.
Thank you very much.